You have battered back the Taken King into the very depths of his flagship, the Dreadnought, and with the help of Cade 6, Erismorn, Commander Zavala, and a whole lot of other Guardians, we have managed to take him down. But you know how it works with the Hive. Once they're dead, they're not truly dead unless you chase them back to their throne world and finish them off there. So it is time for us to do that in this raid, King's Fall. What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, and today I am so excited to bring to you what I still think to this day is one of the greatest raids in Destiny history. This is the moment where Bungie truly hit their stride on raid design. Vault of Glass was a sort of a prototypical sort of design when it comes to raids. Like, yeah, it was very puzzle focused, but they were still sort of figuring a lot of things out. There were a lot of ways to sort of exploit the way that raid worked, and for the most part, it kind of held together, but it was definitely not as creative in the long term and in hindsight as some of its later raids ended up becoming. Crota's End tried to be a lot more combat focused, but as a result ended up having a lot of holes in its design that were very easily exploited by players. King's Fall is the first time where I think all of the knowledge that Bungie gained from designing those first two raids and everything else that they wanted a raid to be sort of all came together in a perfect marriage of combat and mechanics. And to this day holds up so well that when it was brought back for Destiny 2, it went almost virtually unchanged in its mechanics because of how well designed it is. Almost everything about this raid takes ideas from raids, not just in Destiny, but in pretty much all games that have raids, and puts them together in a way that is honestly kind of hard to describe unless you experience them for yourself. So I would have to say this is the first time where you're going to see the idea and the whole design philosophy around Destiny raids truly flourish. But it is not going to start with this opening encounter because, well, I'm going to be honest, no Destiny raid really does. This is sort of just a door opening encounter, not unlike the door opening in the Vault of Glass, although a little bit more active and a little bit more interesting. We have split up into two groups of 3, and we are basically taking different sides here in the Hall of Souls, which is one of the major sections of the Dreadnought. This is a free open space that a lot of players were able to play around in the Dreadnought, in the Taken King, although this was the side that mainly featured the Court of Oryx, which is that section directly in front of us, and is also the portal, the location of the portal that we are currently trying to open. So we take the 3 sides, we run back, we grab these relics, these tomb husks that are going to periodically respawn, I believe at intervals of a minute and 15 per. And over the course of the encounter, they spawn further and further back, but we need to be grabbing these relics, bringing them back, and dunking them in the statues at basically the same time. There is like a few seconds of leeway, but for the most part, you need to be dunking them in at the same time as the other person that grabs them. However, see the time remaining that is counting down? That is always going down, regardless of whether or not you are holding a relic. So sometimes the time does not necessarily line up with the with basically the ability to run it back. Because, for instance, it's like a 25-30 second run back just to get the relic there. So for instance, on the last relic and my raid squad mate, who is currently running it back now, we kind of waited for the timer to run out so the relics could respawn before picking them up, because if you try to run them back when the timer is too low and you don't quite make it, well, then you have to run all the way back, and that kills your run even more. So you're trying to synchronize this to the timer, but it just doesn't always work out that way. But luckily, both sides function on the same timer. So now that we have dunked it, relic respawns, and we can grab it again. I am literally doing that launch right there just so that I can get back as quick as I can, because the time remaining counter pretty much runs on the, pretty much stays the same even after dunking. So I've only got 19 seconds to get there, although I'm actually not sure if my teammate is going to get there in time. It looks like they may. Yeah, they're getting actually pretty close, so I think we're going to be okay on this one. But this is cutting it really close right here. So we're on to the 5th statue here, and if we can both dunk it at the same time, which we're going to do it with a couple seconds to spare, we only got one more left to grab, which is this time going to be the furthest back, which almost guarantees that we are going to need to wait around for it. Now, we are technically not doing this correctly, because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to coordinate so that a squad mate is always in place to grab the next relic once one is dunked. And we're sort of doing this, but not like to an amazing degree. There's not really a whole lot of coordination going on here. I promise we're just screwing around in comms in this part, so it's not like it really matters. We're mostly just kind of letting whoever's closest kind of grab the relic while everybody else kills everything. And the only reason I'm mostly running it is because I am on Strand, which is a very high mobility subclass. But you can see here, we are not going to make it in time, so the person on the far right side is just sort of waiting it out, and we are probably going to end up redoing this one more time. But we only got one more statue left to dunk, which is not too bad. Now, this raid, of all raids that we have looked at thus far, covers by far the most horizontal and vertical ground of any raid. There is a lot of like places to go in this raid. It's very big. It's also the most encounter rich. I mean, technically, Vault of Glass actually has more encounters, but that's if you split, like, the Templar section up into 3 encounters, for instance. But aside from that one particular encounter, or that one particular caveat, King's Fall is far and away the meatiest raid that we have seen yet. It's got a lot going on, and again, is incredibly interesting. Now, as far as the lore of this is concerned, there isn't a ton to say that hasn't already, 1, been covered in the Taken King campaign, and 2, been covered in the Crota's End raid. Because yes, it's the same concept. We're going into a throne world to deal with a hive god yet again, although a much more powerful hive god at that. And the reason we're under here is because there are some symbols that correlate towards later points in the raid that we need to take down to get better rewards at the end of the raid. So that was just kind of the entire group checking those out before we go through the portal. Now begins a platforming section, one of the first true platforming sections in Destiny history. If you thought the Abyss in Crota's End was bad, if you thought the very brief jumping puzzle in Vault of Glass was bad, this is on a whole other level. And I don't actually think it's bad. I actually think it's very enjoyable, but it is a lot more of a test, and was especially more so back in Destiny 1 when you didn't have things like grapple or even the ability to grab onto ledges. Although, I'll be honest, that actually doesn't help too much in this raid anyway, as there aren't a lot of ledges that you can grab onto, specifically in this next part, where you're going to be platforming across, believe it or not, hive tomb ships. That's right. And you are not allowed to vault on these ledges anyway, even in Destiny 2. They just aren't grabbable ledges on the edges of these ships. So you have to pretty much raw dog this entire thing. And it's a little bit tricky if you don't know exactly where to go. I remember back during the world's first run of King's Fall, a lot of teams got stuck on this part for like an hour just because people kept falling. And it's not one of those things where you can really go back and rescue your teammates. If somebody dies on the jumping puzzle here, they're just kind of screwed, and they just have to get there on their own. They have to figure it out. Everybody in the group has to pull together and make it through this part. There is no bailing each other out. So it all starts by hopping on this first ship, and there is really only one other spot where you can take a break, but you just need to be looking off the edges of the ships as you go. And eventually you will see one that has spawned mostly below you, and you're going to use that as a reference point for where you're supposed to drop next. The only reason I have grapple on is in case I do something stupid and have to save it, which is absolutely going to happen. In fact, I can already see it in my edit here that I probably die at some point during this run. But we are officially in Oryx's throne world now, which is interesting because in a lot of ways it does sort of combine with the whole design of the Dreadnought. It's got a lot of the same features as the Dreadnought. I mean, it's really to say that whatever the Dreadnought, the way the Dreadnought looks, Oryx clearly wanted it that way. He designed it to look similar to his throne world, and inversely, his throne world is designed to look similar to the Dreadnought. Whatever is going on with the carpet and the drapes and everything going on here, and yes, I believe this was after I fell, so it's me basically at that point I was just at, because that's where it respawns you. And then we proceed from here. But yeah, but whatever he likes here, I mean, he's clearly fond of whatever this aesthetic is, even if it is, I mean, to put it mildly, interesting, but also very, I guess, gaudy. I mean, gosh, the guy's clearly is an edgelord, which is true. I mean, we all know Oryx is an edgelord. Of course he is. Actually, I was going to say, he's probably the edgiest out of the entire trio, but you know, now that I think about it, I think actually Xivu Arath's got him beat. I think the only one who is not nearly the edgelord is Savathun. And actually, right there, you can actually see the fact that I wasn't able to vault on the ship right now. You can't vault on things that move with you. It just doesn't work that way. So you got to be on your A game. You got to be actually having precision. You got to be making all your jumps, saving your jumps from when you absolutely need them. Sometimes it's not really a good thing to unnecessarily double and or triple jump just because you can in the moment, because you might actually need that a little bit later. But yeah, like I said, in Destiny 2, this is much more of a pushover. I'm sure, in fact, when I go through this section, most of the time, a lot of the deaths are just because we're all pushing each other off of the ships because we all like to mess with each other, as you do with a friend group whenever you're raiding, because, you know. But I do believe we are only one ship away. Now, this is the one that's not immediately apparent as to where you're supposed to go. But that's because this ship spawns at the very last second, so make sure you get on that one. But this is the one right here that actually takes us to the very end. And then we got another platforming session coming up, and it looks like these two are really struggling back here. So they'll catch up in due time. In fact, I'm going to be cutting out a portion of this spot after I show how we normally proceed across this gap. So two people stand on the plates, and the plates are what open up the doorway that allows this ship to pass through. That's if you just want to pass through normally on the ship, but that is not what we are going to be doing because there is actually a secret pathway a little bit further down, and I don't actually know why that ship... Okay, there it goes. Now it's finally going. But yeah, so they're sitting up on that plate right there, and actually there's two plates on the opposite side that correspond in much the same way. But again, the reason we are not going through here is because there, if you can see over on this side where I'm grappling towards, there is a ledge in the wall, and this is actually the first secret chest in the raid. They generally always put one before the first true encounter, so this was their way of doing that, and then you're going to get some nice stuff. Also, there is a symbol up there that needed to be shot. So grab that, get your little extra loot, and confirm that that has been shot, which I did, because just because it's glowing doesn't mean it has. You need that symbol to appear above it to confirm that it has been activated properly. So you go down here where the Shrieker is, and there is two plates down this way, and this is how we open it for people on the opposite side so everybody else can proceed. Either we pass through normally on the ship, or we take that little secret path, and then off they go. There we go. So now we cut to when pretty much everybody has arrived, and we may proceed. So this is taking us to the first true encounter, and where things are going to be evident that this game is fully intent on making everybody participate in this raid, which I'm going to be honest, I freaking love. This right here, this first encounter, is known as the Totems encounter, and much like the opening encounter, you are going to be splitting up into two groups of three who are going to basically be working on a conveyor belt system, if that makes sense. Or I guess maybe just a cycle is also a good term for it too, but I don't know. I like the idea of a conveyor belt just because it's hilarious imagining beating a raid in the, you know, as a factory worker, essentially, because that's just ridiculously silly. So the way that this works, okay, there is a central area where we are all in right now, and there's a plate in this central area. What we are trying to do is dunk a whole bunch of tributes into this plate, but there are totems on either side of the encounter, and if these totems are not constantly babysat, essentially, they will wipe the entire group and the entire thing starts over. So there is a brand that I picked up on the way into this room, and it has a timer counting down. When it reaches 0, it will kill me. But while I have the brand, I can kill enemies, and as many enemies as I kill, that is how much Death Singer's power I will get, okay? This power then needs to be taken to the plate in the center and dunked in, and the more power we get into the plate, the faster we get to actually opening up the door, allowing us to proceed into the next encounter. However, my teammates are going to need to, well, obviously help me out in this endeavor because they will not get Death Singer's power for just killing enemies normally. So they want to mainly avoid helping me kill enemies. This is why I have a machine gun, to slay out as much as I possibly can and clear the room as fast as possible. But once the brand is taken from me, I run up here, I dunk, then I kill a wizard that is up on the top and grab the brand claimer buff, which also has a timer that counts down. While this timer counts down, I need to communicate with my team member who has the brand of the Weaver, and when they get as close to 1 second left as possible, I am going to steal the brand and claim it for myself. Now I am back to killing things with the brand of the Weaver while they run back to dunk, and this just continues on a three-way cycle. The reason this is on a three-way cycle is because if you do it with just the two of you, the timers will generally not sync up, and the person running to the plate won't have enough time to get up to first the wizard, then the knight, to get the brand claimer power and make it back to me in time. In fact, even with 3 people, this can be rough sometimes, which is why I am running up, or sometimes you'll have to run up to meet the person that is claiming it from you to get it exchanged in time, because you can stand off of the totems for a good, I would say, about 6 or 7 seconds and be totally fine, but any longer than that and you're most likely going to die. It is just as important to be swapping the brand around as it is to be standing on these totems, but this is just the whole idea of the fight is rinse and repeat, cycle, constantly swap places. You're always moving behind the person and communicating with them to make sure that you take the brand as late as possible so they can get as many kills as possible to dunk as much Deathsinger's power as possible. That makes sense? I think that's very simple. It's just a lot of killing and a lot of moving and communicating, which is what a raid absolutely should be. So I take it, I start slaying out, and we keep going. You just do this over and over, making sure that you never die. And it's basically just up to both sides to constantly be working together in this endeavor. And you don't have to be using weapons. You can use abilities, you can use supers, any sort of thing that kills an enemy in this encounter is going to be more than enough for you to win this encounter. And would you believe it if I told you that this encounter almost functionally is completely different from the next one, which I really, really like. This is, again, when Bungie really started to hit their stride when it comes to encounter design by making things so unbelievably different on a per encounter basis. Really the only time where there's a lot of overlap is actually the last 2 encounters. Now, unfortunately, you can see here we do get unstoppable champions that spawn, but this is why I have the shotgun to stun it immediately. And I do believe, in fact, I think I actually left too early. Yeah, I had so much Deathsinger's power, I didn't have enough time to dunk it all. But I want to say that this is actually going to end the fight here anyway, because I grabbed so much that got us pretty darn close to the threshold. And I want to say the next person that dunks is going to have more than enough to finish this fight. But yeah, that is the Totems encounter. And like I said, a very good encounter that just all about slaying out, definitely doing it in a way that is incredibly unique and unlike anything else that has been done before it. Somewhat similar to what we saw in Crota's End, but still very much its own thing. And now, the next encounter is the very first battle against an actual boss, of which there are 4 in this raid, if you can believe it. So, like I said, some meaty encounters here. This first encounter is against a boss known as the War Priest. Pretty much the guardian at the gates that allows you, or does not allow you, to get further into the raid until they are defeated. The War Priest encounter is very interesting. So there are now, instead of 2 groups of 3, but there are 3 groups of 2, each minding a different plate around the room. These plates are going to be very important for the mechanic that is required to actually damage the boss. Now, leading up to the plate part, you're just killing enemies. Very simple. Getting lots of kills, mainly just trying to collect ammo, especially for the later parts in the fight, because this is all going to be about getting as much heavy ammo as you possibly can to do damage, because this boss is quite beefy. It has a lot of health, and you're going to need to slay it out as much as you possibly can, because you're only going to be given 3 different chances to do damage. Well, technically 4, but we'll explain why here in a second. So around this arena are 3 different glyphs, each one situated in front of the plate. Eventually, it's going to pop up on the bottom left that the glyph reading sequence has started. The way this works is very simple, although it can take a little bit of practice to execute perfectly. The person in the center of the room, in the middle plate, is going to step on a plate, and they are going to look to their right or their left. Whatever glyph is glowing is the one that they're going to call out, and that is going to be the start of the sequence. They will say right or left. Then the right or left person will step on the plate. They will then call out whatever they see glowing. Then that plate will be stepped on, and then finally the last plate is stepped on. That last plate is where damage is going to generally begin. That person that stepped on the plate third is going to get the brand, basically the same brand that we were getting in the last encounter, and it's called the Aura of the Initiate, or the Brand of the Initiate. This is going to have a timer on it, and eventually, when that timer expires, damage is over. But to extend damage, you need to kill a Taken Knight that spawns somewhere in the room. Someone else needs to do it while everyone else is dealing damage. They will come down with the brand claimer, get the aura as late as possible to extend damage, and then the third person will do the same thing, kill another knight, get the claimer, come back, and when the timer goes as close to 0 as possible, they will claim it as well, and that is damage. Once damage is over, you want to stand behind the glyph, because this giant effect that you see around the room wipes absolutely everything that isn't standing in the shadow of one of these glyphs. everybody that is behind these glyphs, and this is why you want everyone to be in the same spot, everyone that is behind these glyphs will cause that glyph to be destroyed, meaning it is no longer usable for the rest of the fight. So now you're going to have to find a different place to do damage, which means that you're probably going to have to get creative and start moving around the room a little bit. So, like I said, you essentially get 3 chances to do this because there are 3 glyphs, and once each of them are destroyed, you are completely exposed. But technically, you get a 4th because if you can kill him in the middle of that 4th damage phase, he will be dead before he has a chance to wipe you with that final attack. So this is all about being smart because it is very easy to lose the damage phase if you're not going after the knights. You need to have somebody on knight duty. Now, the way that my team does this is because I am the person up top, which is the hardest place to get to. After the glyph reading sequence starts, I usually just camp up top the entire time until a knight spawns up here, because it can only spawn in one of the 3 spots. So the other person on knight duty is essentially going to be they're essentially going to be camped on the 2 knights down below, and I'm going to look up top. If there isn't one up top, and this is like me looking around right now, you can see, so there's a knight down there. The first person already got it, so they have to then run up and with the brand claimer, and then I have to get this one for the 3rd one. But I'm basically the up top scout, and we see if, because there's obviously a 1 in 3 chance, or I guess a 2 in 3 chance that the knight will spawn up top in some way, shape, or form. So I am constantly checking for them to be basically the last resort, because the last thing you want is to be down below and see that the knight is then up top. Otherwise, you're probably not going to kill it and grab the brand in time unless you make a very good call out and let someone in the damage group know that it is a little bit late. So we did not quite do enough damage to finish the damage phase there, and unfortunately we're going to have to go for one more. Now on this 3rd phase, you're going to get, I believe, a lot of different enemies. Like I think you get first you get Hive, then you get Taken, then I think you get a mix of Taken and Hive, if I'm not mistaken here. But yeah, this is pretty much our last chance, so we are going to have to go and do damage over on the right side. I mean, technically we can just be ballsy and do it wherever the heck we want and just tank it, because we should be able to kill him before that 3rd totem goes down. So that's really up to you. I do believe we actually elect to do damage from the middle just because that's the easiest place to do damage. But it's really just about making sure you know how to extend those damage phases. The glyph reading sequence part is easy. It's the finding the knights, tracking them down, and getting the brand claimer buff to the aura in time that is much more important. Otherwise, you have a very short damage phase, you don't do nearly enough, and yeah, then it's just over, and this is how you're going to really lose out on this fight. So you really have to be diligent with your people that are actually doing this. So see how I'm calling it out? Now you can actually see the glow in action now that the glyphs are gone. So I'm calling out that the middle one is the last spot. And I do, again, like I said, I believe we do damage there. So this is, again, me being rewarded for staying up top. Take out the knight, grab brand claimer. The last one spawns on the right, but I actually don't think we're going to need it. So we're just going to lay into the damage as much as we possibly can. And there we go. That is the War Priest, ladies and gentlemen. And also, that is exactly the midway point here in the King's Fall raid. In the next episode, guys, we are going to be heading deep into the cellar, where we're going to be taking on one of the most interesting encounters that Bungie has ever created in Destiny raid history. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this episode very, very much, and I will see you all in the next one.